intoxiqués par la propagande. Des délégations communistes se multiplient. Le prolétariat vient d'entreprendre cette tâche historique. La rééducation de l'homme par l'homme. Nous sommes à un moment de l'histoire de l'humanité qui ressemble au passage de l'homme au singe.
I don't know how to put it. The greedy people. When I go out of town, they ask me where I'm from. And I say, Albany or somewhere else. You know, I don't want to say IdelNoMore. I'm kind of embarrassed to say IdelNoMore.
Embarrassed is a curious word. Explain, we ask. He brings us here.
It's like a nice house?
It is.
Empty?
Empty.
How come?
They're not done yet.
They've been empty for a while, no?
Yes, a year maybe.
A year?
Or two.
Imagine how maddening this would be if you were living in a tent frame and had to look at this empty house. What's worse is we discovered it's not just one house, there are more. Empty, 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 empty. And incredibly, this isn't the only First Nation to talk of a housing crisis while half-finished homes just sit.
So what happened? Well, in talking with the contractor, the residents, and the band office, it seems the houses were empty because they weren't finished. They weren't finished because the money hadn't come in from the federal government to pay to complete the work. And that happened because the band office went ahead and okayed construction without the proper authorization. So everything just stopped and sat.
Money, a problem. It's why the federal government put Attawapiskat under third-party management when the community bellowed about its housing crisis. Finances are now supposed to be out of the community's hands, but the leadership won't let go. Stalemate. And that means breaking it to Clayton Kennedy, the man who, up until now, has been responsible for the money.
It's got to start like next week now. We need some money. If the thing's going to go, we need to have some money so we can hire our crews and get them going.
But the third-party manager says the money would come if you gave him the information he needed to send the money.
The information he's requesting probably will see the undermining of our total organization. That's why there's no trust.
Trust. There's as little of that as there is clarity in Attawapiskat, and it gets personal. The chief and co-manager, who live as a couple in a trailer that was once the jail, travel and work as a unit. Fairly or not, people talk.
The perception is that you're a bit of a problem, and that the relationship with the chief is a bit of a problem, and that it taints.
It doesn't matter what our relation, nobody's business.
Chris Hall joining me now. Chris has obtained a copy of a government-ordered audit into the financial affairs at the Attawapiskat Reserve in Northern Ontario, a reserve very much in the headlines last year and this. And Chris, this is an unreleased copy, but you have had a look through it. What does the audit say?
Okay, Heather, yes, I have had a brief look through it. It's done by the company Deloitte. And what they were looking for was to ensure that money provided to the Attawapiskat First Nation by the federal government, most notably the Aboriginal Affairs and the Health Canada departments, was spent on housing, sewage treatment, health programs, these sorts of things. And what they found was that in the majority of the financial payments made by the brand, that there was either no documentation at all or inadequate documentation to prove that the money was spent where it was supposed to. So fairly significant findings that the problems on the reserve, which in part were blamed on heavy staff turnover at the Attawapiskat First Nation and on different ways that entries were made into the systems of their ledgers. But what the audit could not do really was determine whether the money was spent the way it was intended to be.
Okay, so that is certainly very much a big part of it. This is the chief of Attawapiskat is, of course, someone who is very much in our headlines right now. That's Chief Theresa Spence, into very close to day 30 of her hunger strike there on Victoria Island. Does she figure in this audit at all, Chris?
Yes, in fact, a letter was sent to her by Deloitte detailing some of the issues. Remember, this audit took place of all transactions between April of 2007 and November of 2011. and Chief Spence was either chief or vice chief in the band council for most of that period. And what it told her was that the band had failed to exercise due diligence, had failed to keep records in accordance with what the funding agreements had been with Ottawa. And of course, you remember, much of this money was for housing, and the letter says that they could not find any evidence that the money that was intended for housing had been spent on that important, obviously, commodity. So obviously, this is a very timely report. The government has not released it yet. It's with Aboriginal Affairs Canada. It has been for some weeks now. I expect they may be releasing it later today.
It's not a coincidence that both IdelNoMore and Occupy are law-breaking, vague, counterculture media creations, because they are organized and supported by the same people. IdelNoMore and Occupy Toronto are both what we call astroturf organizations. They pretend to be grassroots movements, but they're artificial, bought and paid for with professionals with big PR budgets. Labor unions, environmentalists, extremists, and anti-Harper groups have simply rebranded their hippie Occupy movement into an Indian Occupy movement.